Welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. As the crisis in the Middle East escalates, the scheduled trilateral talks between the US, Ukraine and Russia are not taking place as planned. In the meantime, though, the warring countries have agreed to exchange about 500 prisoners of war by the end of this week. To look at Ukraine's current relations with Europe, I'm joined by Stepan Rusyn, coordinator of the German-Ukrainian Partnership Program at the Transatlantic Dialogue Center. Hello, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
So this week, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz visited the White House and met with US President Donald Trump. I wanted to ask you, how do you think this meeting will impact the relationship between Germany and the Trump administration, or perhaps more broadly, Europe and the US, especially in the context of seeking peace in Ukraine?
I don't think that this very meeting will have a great impact on the state of the relations. Of course, the Chancellor of Germany tried to make a point that the war on Ukraine has to remain on the American agenda, and he got an affirmative answer on that from Donald Trump, who said that it's still on his focus, but we cannot wait for any further big steps from the US for now, given that they are fully preoccupied with the war in Iran, and given that the negotiating team that deals with Ukraine and Russia is also dealing with Iran portfolio and also dealing with Israel and Gaza portfolio. So it's clear that Germany is playing the role of one of the advocates of Ukraine, together with other European countries in the eyes of the Trump administration, and tries to keep them in the same team as long as US is still supplying Ukraine with intelligence data and American-made weapons that are being financed by the European countries. But it's unlikely that the US will do more, or that the negotiating process that's taking place between Ukraine and Russia under the mediation of the United States will progress in the coming days as it was planned.
Yes, I wanted to talk about the cancelled peace talks between the US, Ukraine and Russia. I suppose it doesn't come as that much of a surprise, but the exchange of the prisoners of war is encouraging to see. How do you perceive that?
It's for sure great news for the families of those who have been kept in Russia, and it's one of the few really practical results of the ongoing negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. And given that there are still more than 6,000 at least reported by Russia Ukrainian prisoners of war, and around 4,000 of Russian POWs in Ukraine, there is potential for those exchanges to be continued. And as for other practical steps, it's very unlikely that anything more than the current exchange will happen.
We also hear that Ukraine's hope of fast-tracked EU accession is very much out of question. There was a dinner last night in Brussels that confirmed that EU ambassadors are not keen on this reversed enlargement proposal, whereby membership comes first and integration later. What do you think of this process, and also what do you think of this growing skepticism?
I would not describe it as a growing skepticism. It's the existing skepticism that now Ukraine and the European Commission try to combat. And both Commission and Ukraine, they try to make a point that the situation in Europe, security architecture is being changed, and the enlargement process that have been designed for the peacetime needs revision. First of all, to prevent the misuse and prevent the intrusion by third actors in the European affairs, both by destabilizing the candidate states and by sowing conflict inside of the EU. So, of course, there is no concrete plan as of now. The European Commission is working on it. And it's one of the ways for Europe to deliver, to make a contribution to the ongoing peace talks. And it's considered also by Ukraine as a prerequisite for ensuring a lasting peace in Ukraine after ceasefire or full peace agreement is being achieved. And there is hope on the Ukrainian side that the understanding of this importance of this moment is also will be spread among the member states. And Commissioner Koss visited Berlin yesterday, and as far as I understand, it was her main message here, and trying to win Germany as not the most skeptical, but the state that is ready to discuss this idea, and then to make the circle of these countries who are ready to embrace at least discussing the idea bigger.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that your organization does and how Germany's policy towards Ukraine perhaps has changed in recent months. We know that Merz said that Ukraine joining the EU by 2027 is unrealistic.
It's an assessment even made on the part of the Ukrainian government. It's the main, even the position of President Zelensky is that Ukraine may be ready on the technical level by 2027, but given that this process requires acceptance of all member states and ratification processes, it's for sure not going to happen by the 1st of January 2027. The discussion now is whether this reversed enlargement approach, where Ukraine can get a kind of membership light with the way to the full membership, which will be subject to Ukraine implementing reforms. It's an open idea, and only if it's this light membership model that's being accepted by the EU members, it makes it realistic for Ukraine to be to become a member state till the end of 2030s. So Ukrainian government obviously aims high and tries to put pressure, given the situation where Ukraine is now, on its European allies and asking them to deliver at least on this promise. But even Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister for the European integration understands the limits and what is realistic and what is not that much realistic.
And what do you consider to be the greatest obstacles for Ukraine's membership in the EU? Maybe membership and integration, shall we say?
One dimension of this is internal readiness of Ukraine. It's obvious that EU member states and big countries like Poland, Germany, France, they will not accept any compromise on Ukraine's progress in the fundamentals, on the rule of law and anti-corruption. So that's the homework that Ukraine has to do in the environment of an ongoing war, and it's for sure not an easy task, and that's one thing where Ukraine will have to deliver very concrete results in order to start a serious conversation on this with the EU member states and the European Commission. On the second part is the overall structure of the EU enlargement process. So that's a procedure that was agreed by all EU member states, and to be changed and to go to this fast track membership, you need yes from 27 countries as well. And in this way, Ukraine will have to work with all of those 27 countries and presents good argument why Ukraine may be an asset for Europe from security, economical, or even agricultural point of view, and that it will not, if this model is being accepted, and not become a burden. And that's something that if Ukraine manages to convince the member state leadership, then those leadership can also persuade the population and the citizens of the EU member states. So it's a two-way road, which is not easy, but I see the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian society perceives EU membership path as the only viable, positive future perspective for Ukraine. And I see them totally being focused on achieving this.
Now, I wanted to talk about the growing animosity between Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and President Zelensky. There was a post that came up on X saying that Viktor Orban said that he will use force to break the blockade of Russian oil on the Druzhba pipeline. To what extent do you think that he will escalate the situation in light of the political campaigning taking place in Hungary? We've had President Zelensky also respond to this, also with a little bit of determination, shall we say. We've also heard something about President Zelensky saying that the Druzhba pipeline will be reopened in about a month and a half. But nonetheless, there is strong animosity between the two. What do you think about that situation?
I would agree that's animosity may be the best word to describe it. It's becoming very personal. And from this point of view, I don't see the ways where Hungarians will be open to de-escalate the situation. And the only instrument that they are now using is the freeze of the 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine, which was already agreed on the level of the leaders of state and had to be formally approved by EU ambassadors in Brussels, and which the Hungarian representative refused to do. And it's very likely that until the Druzhba pipeline is operational again, the Hungarians will stick to this decision. And it's also, given the situation where Ukraine is now, when it requires financial assistance already starting from April, and even if there is a change of government in Hungary, and even if that government is open to a new policy on Ukraine, this government will come in power only after May or June. And what will this Ukrainian financial situation be in this 3 months till middle of summer is still an open question to which the EU member states have not found an answer yet. So Ukraine is already in quite vulnerable position, but I don't see President Zelensky also going to step down in this confrontation. And as far as we get from the official Ukrainian announcements, the Druzhba pipeline is heavily damaged, and it will take, as you said, months or months and a half to full repair. And I also don't see Ukrainians being able to do it earlier due to technical constraints.
Okay, Stepan Rusyn of the Transatlantic Dialogue Center, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for World Talks. Thank you so much for joining us. World News is coming up next. Goodbye.